Reborn, when the school beauty met the thug, I didn't fall for her trap and gave her my jerk. Chapter 1: The Night That Changed Everything. The night air was heavy with tension, the dim glow of a flickering street lamp casting eerie shadows on the alley walls. I stood frozen, the group of thugs closing in. Their mocking laughter echoed as my fists clenched at my sides. Ethan, my childhood friend, was beside me, his body tensed as if ready to jump into action. And then there was Emily, the school queen, beautiful and untouchable, standing behind us, trembling and clutching her designer bag as though it might shield her from the danger. The gang leader stepped forward, his smirk widening as he twirled a metal pipe in his hands. "What do we have here?" "The school queen and her loyal guard dogs," he sneered. "This should be fun." My heart pounded in my chest, fear and adrenaline coursing through me. I glanced at Ethan, who was staring at Emily with an intensity I'd never seen before. "Ethan," I hissed under my breath. "Stay back. I'll handle this." But before I could do anything, Ethan sprang into action, not toward the thugs, but toward Emily. He grabbed her hand and whispered urgently, "Run." Confused, I took a step toward them. "Ethan, what are you?" Before I could finish, Ethan darted past me, pulling Emily along with him. My breath caught in my throat as I watched them disappear down the alley, leaving me behind. The gang didn't give me a chance to process what had just happened. The leader sneered, "Looks like your friends ditched you. Too bad for you." I stood my ground, determined not to show fear, but it was futile. They descended upon me like a pack of wolves, their fists and feet a blur of pain. I tried to fight back, but it was hopeless. The last thing I remembered was the sound of their laughter and the sight of Ethan and Emily vanishing into the distance. The gang closed in, their footsteps echoing against the brick walls of the alley. My mind raced as I stood there, frozen between fight and flight. The leader, a wiry man with a scar running down his cheek, grinned menacingly. "Well, looks like the little hero was left behind," he taunted, tapping the pipe against his palm. "Let's see how much you can take." I turned my head for just a second, hoping, praying, that Ethan would look back, realize what he had done, and return for me. But all I saw was his retreating figure pulling Emily further into the shadows. The gang leader didn't give me time to think. He swung the pipe, and I barely managed to dodge, the sharp whistle of air making my heart pound. My instincts kicked in, and I raised my arms to block the next blow, but the force sent me stumbling backward. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," another thug sneered, cracking his knuckles. "But guts won't save you." I tried to fight back. I really did. I swung my fists and kicked, managing to land a few hits, but it wasn't enough. There were too many of them, and they were stronger, faster. The blows rained down, each one more painful than the last. "Still standing?" "Impressive," the leader mocked as I struggled to stay upright. "But let's see how long that lasts." I collapsed to my knees, blood trickling down my face. My vision blurred, and my breaths came in ragged gasps. I thought of Ethan again, the boy who had once promised to protect me, and anger surged through me, mixing with the pain. "Is this all you've got?" I spat, glaring up at the gang leader. My voice was hoarse, but I refused to let them see my fear. The leader chuckled, raising the pipe once more. "Feisty. I like that." Just as the pipe came down, I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then, I heard a loud shout. "Hey! What's going on here?" The sound of approaching footsteps and the beam of a flashlight cut through the darkness. The gang scattered like cockroaches, their retreating figures disappearing into the night. When I opened my eyes, a man in a security uniform was standing over me, his face a mix of concern and disbelief. "Miss, are you okay?" he asked, kneeling beside me. I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry, and my head was spinning. The man called for an ambulance, and I felt myself slipping into unconsciousness. The hospital room. When I woke up, the sterile smell of antiseptic filled my nose. My body felt like it had been hit by a truck, every muscle aching. I turned my head slowly, wincing as pain shot through my neck. My mother was sitting beside the bed, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She reached out to hold my hand, her grip firm yet trembling. "Why, Mia?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you just run?" Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't have an answer. How could I explain the betrayal I felt, the way Ethan's actions had shattered my trust in him? A knock at the door interrupted us. I turned my head to see Ethan standing there, a sheepish look on his face. He held a bouquet of flowers, but his presence only made my stomach churn. "Mia," he said softly, stepping into the room. I'm sorry." I stared at him, the anger bubbling to the surface. "Sorry?" I croaked, my voice raw. "You left me, Ethan. You left me to die." His face fell, and for a moment, I thought I saw guilt in his eyes. But it wasn't enough. Words wouldn't erase the pain or the scars, both physical and emotional, that I now carried. "I didn't know what to do," he said weakly. I panicked. I just wanted to protect Emily. His words were like a slap to the face. "Protect Emily?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What about me, Ethan? I was your best friend." "I know," he whispered, his head hanging low. "I know I messed up. But I'll make it up to you, I promise." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My mother glared at him, her protective instincts kicking in. "I think you've done enough, Ethan. Please leave." He hesitated, looking like he wanted to say more, but in the end, he turned and walked away. The sight of his retreating figure was all too familiar, and it only deepened the ache in my chest. The turning point. That night, as I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. I wouldn't let this define me. I wouldn't let Ethan, Emily, or anyone else dictate my worth. I would rise from this, stronger, smarter, and unbreakable. They thought they had seen the last of me, but they were wrong. This was only the beginning. Chapter 2: Rising from the Ashes. The weeks following the attack were some of the hardest of my life. My body ached with every movement, but the physical pain paled in comparison to the emotional scars I carried. The betrayal, the humiliation, and the lingering question of why I wasn't enough for Ethan to protect, they haunted me day and night. I stayed at home during my recovery, avoiding the world. News of the incident spread quickly. The girl who got beaten up because her hero saved the school queen? It was the perfect fodder for gossip. The whispers, the online comments, and even the sympathetic looks from neighbors were suffocating. But somewhere deep within me, a spark refused to die. The unexpected visit. One afternoon, as I sat on the couch flipping through a book to distract myself, the doorbell rang. My mom answered, and her voice drifted into the living room. "Mia, you have a visitor." Curious, I shuffled to the door, still sore from my injuries. When I saw who it was, my breath hitched. Emily stood there, her usually confident demeanor replaced by a hesitant, almost apologetic expression. "For what?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. For running away with Ethan while I got beaten up? Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. I didn't know he would leave you like that. I didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late. I stared at her, unsure if I could believe her. But before I could respond, she handed me the gift bag. Inside was a box of chocolates and a handwritten note. I know this doesn't fix anything, she said softly, but I genuinely hope you'll recover soon. Anne. I hope you know you didn't deserve what happened. Her words caught me off guard. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Emily left soon after, leaving me with the chocolates, the note, and an overwhelming sense of confusion. Ethan's second apology. Ethan came by a few days later, his face filled with guilt and desperation. He had been texting and calling nonstop, but I ignored him every time. When he showed up at my door unannounced, I decided it was time to confront him. Why are you here, Ethan? I asked, my tone icy. I just want to make things right, he said, his hands clenched into fists. Mia, I messed up. I panicked, and I chose wrong. But I swear, I'll do whatever it takes to make it up to you. I laughed bitterly. You can't make it up to me, Ethan. You showed me exactly where I stand in your life. You chose Emily, and you left me to die. He flinched at my words, his guilt written all over his face. I didn't mean to. But you did. I snapped, cutting him off. You didn't even look back, Ethan. You didn't care. And now you want to come here and act like an apology will fix everything? He opened his mouth to respond, but I didn't want to hear it. I slammed the door in his face, my heart pounding. A new beginning. That night, I stared at myself in the mirror, the bruises on my face fading but still visible. I traced the outline of one, my mind racing with thoughts of everything I had been through. I realized that waiting for Ethan's apology or Emily's guilt wouldn't heal me. I had to take control of my own life. The next morning, I made a decision. I enrolled in self-defense classes, determined never to feel helpless again. I started studying harder than ever, preparing for the exams I had missed. And I began to rebuild myself, piece by piece. The return to school. When I returned to school, the stares and whispers were still there, but I held my head high. I wasn't the same Mia who had been left behind in that alley. Ethan tried to approach me multiple times, but I ignored him. Emily stayed out of my way, her earlier apology seeming genuine, but I wasn't ready to forgive her either. Instead, I focused on myself. I joined clubs, made new friends, and worked on becoming the best version of me. Slowly but surely, I felt the weight of the past lifting. But life wasn't done testing me. The twist. One evening, as I walked home from the library, a car pulled up beside me. The windows rolled down, revealing a familiar face. It was the gang leader who had attacked me that night. "You've got guts, kid," he said with a smirk. "I've been keeping an eye on you. Looks like you're tougher than I thought." My heart raced as I backed away, but his next words stopped me in my tracks. "Your boyfriend, Ethan? He made a deal with us that night. Promised to pay us off if we didn't hurt the girl he was with." My blood ran cold. "What?" The gang leader chuckled. "You didn't know, did you? He sold you out to save himself and the school queen. You were just the scapegoat." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Everything I thought I knew about that night was a lie. Ethan hadn't just abandoned me, he had betrayed me in the worst possible way. The resolve. That night, I sat in my room, shaking with anger and disbelief. But instead of breaking down, I made a vow to myself. I wouldn't let Ethan or anyone else control my narrative. I would rise above this, stronger than ever. And when the time came, I would make sure Ethan faced the consequences of his actions. This wasn't just my story anymore. It was my fight for justice, my journey to reclaim my life, and my determination to ensure that no one ever underestimated me again. Chapter 3: The Truth Comes to Light. After the gang leader's shocking revelation, I couldn't sleep. My mind was a storm of anger, betrayal, and confusion. Ethan had betrayed me on a level I never thought possible, and now the question wasn't just about forgiving him, it was about exposing him. But how could I do that without sinking to his level? I needed to be smart, precise, and ensure that everyone saw Ethan for who he truly was. Gathering evidence. The next day, I decided to meet the gang leader again. As risky as it was, he held the key to uncovering the truth. I went to the neighborhood where the gang usually hung out, my heart pounding in my chest. The leader, who went by the name Kai, was lounging against a wall with his crew. When he saw me, his expression shifted to amusement. "Back so soon?" he asked, smirking. "I need proof," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You said Ethan made a deal with you that night. If you have any way to prove it, I need it." Kai raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "What's in it for me?" I hesitated. "What do you want?" He tilted his head, considering. "How about you don't call the cops on me for what happened that night?" I nodded. "Fine. Just give me what I need." Kai laughed, pulling out his phone. "Lucky for you, we record everything. Insurance, you know?" He played a video that sent chills down my spine. It showed Ethan standing in the alley that night, talking to Kai. "Just take the money and leave us alone," Ethan said in the video. "I don't care what you do to her, just don't touch Emily." My stomach churned, but I kept my composure. "Send that to me," I said quietly. Kai did, and I left without another word, clutching my phone like it was a lifeline. The confrontation. The next day at school, I couldn't avoid Ethan any longer. I found him by the lockers, chatting with his friends like nothing had happened. "Ethan," I called out, my voice cold and sharp. He turned, his face lighting up when he saw me. "Mia!" "I've been meaning to." "Save it," I interrupted. "We need to talk. Now." His friends exchanged curious looks but left us alone. I led him to a quiet corner, pulling out my phone. "What's this about?" he asked, feigning innocence. I didn't answer. Instead, I played the video. As Ethan watched, the color drained from his face. "Mia, I can explain." "Explain what?" I snapped. "That you sold me out to save Emily? That you didn't care what happened to me as long as your precious queen was safe?" He stammered. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. "You had a choice," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "And you chose her. You left me to suffer, Ethan. And now everyone's going to know." His eyes widened in panic. "You wouldn't." I gave him a bitter smile. "Watch me." Exposing the truth. That afternoon, I uploaded the video to social media with a caption, "The truth about that night." It spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone in school had seen it. Ethan's reputation crumbled overnight. People who once admired him turned against him, and Emily, to her credit, confronted him in front of everyone. "How could you do that?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "I never asked you to save me at her expense." Ethan tried to defend himself, but no one was listening. Emily's redemption. To my surprise, Emily sought me out after the video went viral. "Mia," she said hesitantly, "can we talk?" I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't know what Ethan had done until I saw the video. I never would have let him leave you behind if I'd known. Her sincerity caught me off guard. "Why do you care now?" "Because you didn't deserve any of this," she said, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "And because I want to make things right, if you'll let me." I studied her for a moment before nodding. "We'll see." A new ally. Emily and I formed an unlikely alliance. Together, we worked to spread awareness about bullying and betrayal, using my story as a cautionary tale. Kai, surprisingly, also became an unexpected ally. He respected my courage and even helped me organize a self-defense workshop at school. The final encounter with Ethan. Ethan tried to approach me one last time, but I stopped him before he could speak. "There's nothing you can say that will fix this," I told him. "You made your choice, Ethan. Now you have to live with it." He looked devastated, but I felt nothing. For the first time, I was free of his hold on me. The end of the chapter. By the end of the school year, I had transformed. I wasn't the same girl who had been left behind in that alley. I was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. As I walked across the stage at graduation, I felt a sense of pride and accomplishment. I had survived the worst and come out on top. And as I looked out at the crowd, I knew that my story was far from over. This was just the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Chapter 4: Rebuilding and Moving Forward. Graduation day marked a new chapter in my life, but it wasn't just the end of high school, it was the start of my personal transformation. With Ethan's betrayal behind me and Emily becoming a surprising ally, I felt like I had finally shaken off the chains that had bound me for so long. But while I was stepping into a new world of freedom, there were still things to untangle in my heart. The real challenge now was learning to trust again and rebuild myself from the inside out. Reclaiming my confidence. After the whirlwind of Ethan's exposure and the months that followed, I could feel my self-worth slowly returning. I had spent too long being the girl who was always second to Emily, always overlooked by Ethan. But as I walked across that stage at graduation, I realized something important: I didn't need anyone to validate me anymore. I had taken the pain from that night, the hurt from Ethan's betrayal, and turned it into strength. I signed up for college, determined to carve my own path without worrying about anyone else's expectations. My focus was clear: no more hiding, no more apologizing for existing, and most importantly, no more being anyone's backup plan. Emily's redemption. Despite everything, Emily remained a part of my life, and our friendship evolved. At first, I didn't trust her completely. How could I? After all, she was the girl who had unknowingly gotten me caught in the middle of her drama with Ethan. But over time, I saw that she was genuinely remorseful. She had never asked for Ethan's help at my expense, and when she realized the truth, she didn't just apologize, she made an effort to change. We became close friends, and she slowly earned my trust. Emily was no longer the girl who was always in the spotlight. Instead, she became someone who recognized the value of kindness and standing up for what was right. We both knew what it felt like to be hurt, to be used, and together we decided to help others who were dealing with similar situations. We started volunteering at local shelters and organizing awareness campaigns about toxic relationships and betrayal. Ethan's final attempt. One day, just as I thought the chapter on Ethan was closed for good, he found a way to reach me. It was a text, simple but heavy with emotion. "Mia, I never meant to hurt you. I'm so sorry for everything. I made the worst mistake of my life, and I don't know how to make it right." I stared at the message for a long time. My heart didn't race anymore. It didn't feel like the betrayal was fresh. But still, part of me wondered if this apology was sincere or just another attempt at manipulation. I texted back, "It's too late for apologies. You made your choice, and I made mine. I've moved on." His reply came in an instant, "I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope you can find peace. I regret everything." And that was it. No more long explanations, no more trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. Ethan had said his piece, and I had my final answer. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about closure. New beginnings. As the days went on, I started to embrace the freedom I had fought for. College was a whole new world, and I was ready to dive in. I joined student clubs, made new friends, and even participated in a few leadership roles. I became more involved with social causes, using my story to speak out against bullying and betrayal. Through all of it, I grew more confident in myself. I was no longer the girl who had been left behind in that alley, waiting for someone to save her. I was my own savior now, and I was determined to make the most of my second chance. The unlikely ally, Kai. Just when I thought I was fully healed, I received an unexpected message from Kai, the gang leader who had once played such a huge role in Ethan's betrayal. "Mia, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I owe you one. Ethan and his crew have been up to some shady stuff. I wanted to give you a heads up before things get worse." At first, I was skeptical. Kai was a criminal, a person I never wanted to trust. But I remembered how he had respected my strength and how he had kept his word when I needed him. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet him. At a dimly lit cafe, he slid a folder across the table. "This is all I know. Ethan's been involved in some serious illegal deals. I'm not asking for a thank you, just letting you know in case things escalate." My heart raced as I flipped through the documents. Kai's warning was far more serious than I expected. Ethan had been working with people I didn't know, running scams and schemes that could ruin him if exposed. "Why are you helping me?" I asked, eyeing him suspiciously. Kai shrugged. "I don't like seeing people get played, especially someone who's had it as rough as you. You didn't deserve that, and I respect you for handling it the way you did." I nodded, understanding. "Thanks." This unexpected twist showed me something important. Life was unpredictable. Sometimes, the people who hurt you could come back with a chance at redemption. And sometimes, the hardest part of moving forward wasn't leaving the past behind, it was learning how to use what happened to make yourself stronger. A fresh start. As I stood on the edge of a new future, I realized that this chapter of my life wasn't about what Ethan had done, or even about how Emily had betrayed me. It was about me taking control of my own story. I had walked through darkness, faced betrayal and pain, but now I was standing tall, ready to embrace the light. With new friends, new opportunities, and a renewed sense of purpose, I was finally free. And this time, I wasn't looking back. The end of my high school story wasn't a tragedy. It was a triumph, a victory over the lies, the pain, and the people who tried to hold me back. Now, it was time to take on the world. Chapter 5: Rising Above and Reclaiming My Future. The months that followed my graduation and the revelation of Ethan's dark side seemed to blur together, a whirlwind of new beginnings and old scars being healed. College life was everything I had hoped for and more. There were days when I felt completely liberated, walking through campus with my head held high, no longer the girl everyone pitied or laughed at. I was no longer defined by my past. I was defining myself. Rebuilding with purpose. College wasn't just an academic journey for me, it was a place of reinvention. It was here that I realized I could make a difference, not just for myself, but for others who had faced betrayal, shame, and hardship. I had learned how to be resilient, how to protect myself, and how to take my story and turn it into something powerful. I joined several student organizations, one focused on mental health advocacy and another that supported victims of bullying and abuse. Through these groups, I found people who shared similar experiences, and together, we became a tight-knit community. I wasn't just a victim of my past anymore, I was a voice, a symbol of strength for others who were still struggling. We held workshops, gave talks, and supported each other, constantly reminding ourselves that no matter how tough life got, we always had each other's backs. Unexpected growth in friendship. Emily and I continued to grow closer. I had no illusions that our relationship would be perfect, but there was a sense of camaraderie between us that I hadn't anticipated. Emily, in her own way, had become a reflection of what I could have been had I stayed in that role of being constantly overshadowed by others. She had grown, too, realizing that there was more to life than being at the top and that true success was about character, integrity, and kindness. We started a campaign to raise awareness about toxic relationships and the importance of self-worth, hoping to prevent others from experiencing the same pain we had gone through. We reached out to schools, organized events, and even started a blog where we shared our personal stories. The response was overwhelming. People from all over the country reached out, sharing their own experiences and thanking us for the work we were doing. The surprise encounter: Kai's past and my future. One day, as I sat in the campus library studying, my phone buzzed with a message from Kai. It was strange. Kai and I had kept in touch over the months, mostly through text messages, but our interactions had been brief and cordial. This message was different, though. "Mia, I need to talk to you. There's something you should know about Ethan. It's bigger than you think." I felt a chill run through me. Ethan had caused enough chaos in my life, and I had no desire to relive that nightmare. Still, something about the message felt urgent, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. I agreed to meet him at a nearby coffee shop. When I arrived, Kai was sitting at a table near the back. He looked different, more serious, almost like he had something heavy weighing on him. As soon as he saw me, he motioned for me to sit down. I don't know how to say this, but I think Ethan's gotten in deeper than I thought. It's not just petty scams anymore. He's mixed up in something dangerous. People from the underground are after him. They don't care who gets hurt. I listened, my heart pounding. I had known Ethan was trouble, but this was a level I hadn't anticipated. He had always been selfish and reckless, but I never imagined he would sink this low. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, trying to process what he was saying. "I don't expect you to thank me," Kai said quietly. "I know I've hurt you in the past, but I'm trying to make it right. I've seen how much you've grown, and I respect that. You deserve to know what you're dealing with." I sat back, absorbing his words. The man who had once been a part of Ethan's crew was now giving me a warning, looking out for me in his own way. It was surreal. "I'll take care of it." "I don't want any more drama," I said, my voice steady. But thank you. I don't know what you expect from me, but I'll never forget this. Facing the past one last time. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. I wasn't afraid of Ethan anymore, but I couldn't ignore the danger he might bring to my life and the lives of those I cared about. I started keeping a low profile, avoiding the places where I knew he might be, and focusing more on my studies. One evening, after I finished volunteering at a community center, I got a message from an unknown number. It was a photo of Ethan, standing in front of a rundown building, looking disheveled and desperate. "Mia, I need your help. They're coming for me." I didn't mean for any of this to happen. The message felt like a trap, but part of me still felt a pang of sympathy for the boy I had once loved. Even after everything, I couldn't entirely turn my back on him. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I had learned to protect myself, to guard my heart. Instead of rushing to his aid, I contacted the authorities and sent them the information. If Ethan was in danger, it was his mess to clean up. I couldn't save him again. A new path forward. The weeks that followed were filled with tension, but nothing significant happened. Ethan's trouble with the underground world seemed to fade, and I heard through the grapevine that he had disappeared from the city. Whether it was due to legal trouble or the fact that people were finally fed up with him, I wasn't sure. All I knew was that my life had continued moving forward, as I knew it would. I finished my first year of college with honors, surrounded by friends who believed in me and supported me. Emily and I continued to work together, and our friendship became a true source of strength. The pain from my past, though still a part of me, no longer defined me. I had found my own voice, my own path, and my own peace. Now, the future was mine to create. And this time, I wasn't afraid to live it on my own terms. Chapter 6: The Call for Revenge. Though I had made significant strides in moving on from my past, there was still an unsettling feeling that I couldn't shake. My years with Ethan, the pain, the betrayal, everything I had endured still felt raw, simmering beneath the surface of my newfound life. I had worked hard to rebuild myself, but the truth remained: Ethan had never paid for what he did to me. Not only had he ruined my life in high school, but he had also dragged me through a pit of humiliation and despair that took years to climb out of. I had moved on, yes, but there was a deep part of me that couldn't quite forgive the way he'd treated me. A part of me wanted him to suffer the consequences of his actions, to see him experience the same kind of humiliation and pain he'd inflicted on me. I tried to push the thought away, convincing myself that I was better than that I had grown past the need for revenge. But the seed was planted, and it began to take root. The first step: investigating Ethan's downfall. It started innocently enough, just a few searches on social media, digging into Ethan's life. I wanted to know where he was, what he was doing, and whether he had continued his path of destruction. What I found both shocked and disgusted me. Ethan had sunk deeper into his toxic world. He was involved with dangerous people, criminals, and shady business dealings. From gambling debts to racketeering, Ethan had spiraled far from the charming, reckless boy I once knew. There was one thing that stood out: Ethan was in debt. Deep debt. The kind that could ruin his life and get him into serious trouble. I had seen it before: people like him didn't have any other way out. They got tangled in the underworld, hoping for some miracle to pull them free. But this time, it wasn't a gang of thugs he had to worry about. This time, it was my turn. The plan, manipulation, and exposure. I spent weeks carefully researching every move Ethan made. I made connections with people who had ties to the underground world he was involved with: low-level criminals, petty hustlers, people who were willing to talk for the right price. I gathered information, carefully piecing together a web of evidence that could ruin him. I knew he had a few skeletons hidden away, but I was determined to find something that would truly break him. The plan was simple: expose Ethan for who he really was. I would manipulate his reputation until it was in tatters, and he would never be able to escape the consequences of his actions. I would make sure that the people who had once admired him, his friends, his colleagues, the people he had once used, saw him for what he truly was, a coward, a liar, and a man who betrayed everyone he ever cared about. I started small. I anonymously tipped off some of his business partners about his illegal dealings. I sent incriminating evidence to some of his former friends. I made sure people started questioning his motives, his intentions. And as the rumors grew louder, I pulled back, letting the chaos unfold on its own. The turning point, the face-off. It wasn't long before I saw Ethan's life beginning to crumble. His business deals started to fall apart. His friends turned against him. His once unshakable confidence wavered. But it wasn't enough for me. I wanted him to feel the weight of everything he had done to me. One evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Ethan. The message was short, but it cut through me like a knife. "Mia, I know what you've been doing. It's enough. Stop now. Meet me." For a moment, I hesitated. Was I really ready to face him? Did I even want to hear him beg for forgiveness? But then the anger flooded through me like a wave I couldn't control. I had suffered enough. It was time for him to pay. I agreed to meet him. The confrontation. We met at an old, secluded park. The sky was overcast, the air thick with tension. Ethan stood there, looking different, more disheveled, more broken than I had ever seen him. His eyes were hollow, and the swagger that once defined him was gone. "Mia," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know how you found out about everything. But I'm begging you, please. Stop this. You're ruining me." I stared at him, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. I had always known this day would come, the day he would realize what he had done to me, the day he would face the consequences. But now that it was here, it didn't feel as sweet as I imagined. "You ruined me, Ethan," I said, my voice cold and firm. "You destroyed everything I had. My reputation, my future, my trust. And you never once cared. So why should I care about you now?" Ethan's expression twisted with guilt and fear. "I was stupid. I didn't know what I was doing. I'm sorry, Mia. I know I hurt you. But please, this isn't the way to get back at me. You don't have to do this. You've made it. You've moved on. Let me go." I walked closer, standing just a few inches away from him. "I've moved on, but I'll never forget what you did. And I don't care about your sorry excuse for a life anymore. This isn't about getting back at you, it's about you finally paying for everything." The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, it all came rushing back. But this time, I wasn't afraid. This time, I wasn't powerless. The fallout, Ethan's downfall. After that night, Ethan's life began to fall apart at an even faster rate. The evidence I had planted started to come to light, and people who had once respected him turned their backs. His debts spiraled out of control, and the people who had been helping him cover his tracks abandoned him. In the end, it wasn't me who destroyed him. It was his own choices, his own arrogance, and his inability to change. The people he had hurt along the way came for him one by one, and they didn't stop until he had nothing left. The once popular, untouchable Ethan was now a shadow of his former self, a man who had lost everything. Moving forward, the price of revenge. Revenge, I had learned, didn't bring closure. It didn't heal wounds or restore the past. In the end, I was left standing in the wreckage of Ethan's life, but something felt hollow. I had gotten what I wanted. I had seen him suffer, and yet the satisfaction I thought I'd feel never came. Instead, I felt emptier. It was a reminder that revenge doesn't heal, it only leaves behind more scars. But that was something I would have to live with. And as I walked away from the ruins of my past, I promised myself one thing: no matter how much I had hurt, I would never let it define me again. The future was still mine to claim. Chapter 7: The Aftermath of Revenge. As the days went by, the aftermath of Ethan's downfall was evident in everything around me. The once lively group of friends he had surrounded himself with, those who once admired him, had all but disappeared. No one was left to defend him, and no one seemed to care about the once charismatic, reckless figure he had been. I had done what I set out to do, but now that it was done, a strange sense of emptiness began to settle in. The satisfaction I had imagined, the sense of justice that I thought would make me whole, never came. Instead, I felt numb, as if I had simply completed a task that didn't bring me peace. Ethan had suffered, yes, but it didn't erase the pain he had caused me. It didn't undo the years of humiliation, the missed opportunities, or the years I had lost while trying to recover from his betrayal. I often found myself sitting in the quiet of my apartment, reflecting on everything that had happened. I had risen from the ashes of my past, built a new life, and finally found peace in who I had become. Yet the question lingered: was it worth it? Reconnecting with the past. In the weeks following the final confrontation with Ethan, I spent more time focusing on myself, on healing. I rediscovered old passions that had been buried under layers of anger and hurt. I reconnected with friends who had stood by me through the worst of my times. I took long walks in the park, letting the world around me soothe my soul. But it wasn't just about moving on from Ethan, it was about reclaiming my life. It was during this period of healing that I began to realize something profound: revenge had never truly been my answer. It had been a means to an end, a way to feel powerful in a world where I had once felt helpless. But now, I could see that true power came from letting go, not holding on to anger. The unexpected encounter. One evening, while grabbing a coffee at a local cafe, I bumped into someone I hadn't expected to see again: Lucas, a guy I had known during high school. We hadn't been close back then, but we'd shared a few conversations during group projects. He had always been kind to me, and we had gotten along better than I had with most of the people in my life at that time. "Hey, Mia," Lucas said, his warm smile catching me off guard. "It's been a while." I hadn't seen him in years, and the years had been kind to him. He was dressed in a sharp jacket and had the same friendly, laid-back vibe I remembered. There was a lightness in his eyes now that I hadn't noticed before. "Lucas." I smiled, feeling a rush of familiarity. "I didn't expect to see you here." He laughed, taking a seat at the table next to me. "I'm just here for some coffee. What about you? You still doing well?" The conversation flowed easily, and before long, I found myself telling him about my journey, the hardships, the self-discovery, and how I had finally been able to let go of the past. It was therapeutic, speaking to someone who had always been outside the chaos of my life. Lucas listened with a thoughtful expression, never interrupting. "Sounds like you've come a long way," he said when I finished. "You're stronger than you think." I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. It was one thing to hear compliments from people who had always been in my life, but hearing it from someone who hadn't been there for the worst of it gave me a new sense of validation. It was a reminder that I wasn't alone in my healing, even if I had felt isolated at times. The final piece: forgiving myself. As weeks passed, I saw Lucas more often. We began to spend time together outside of the cafe, talking about everything and nothing at all. He was patient, kind, and didn't push me to confront my past. But I could feel a change inside me, a shift I hadn't expected. One evening, as we walked through the park, he said something that stuck with me. "You've been through a lot, Mia." But sometimes, the hardest thing isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving yourself. Those words echoed in my mind long after we parted ways. I had focused so much on punishing Ethan, on seeking justice, that I hadn't even realized how much I had been punishing myself. For years, I had blamed myself for what happened between us. I had internalized the shame, the humiliation, the sense of failure. But now, I realized that the person who needed the most healing wasn't Ethan, it was me. The realization. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to keep holding on to the anger and resentment. I didn't need to let Ethan's actions continue to control my life. The real power lay in letting go. In forgiving myself for the things I couldn't change. In embracing the person I had become, not because of my past, but in spite of it. And so, as I finally closed the door on my past with Ethan, I opened a new chapter in my life. One where I was free from the weight of old grudges and the bitterness of revenge. Epilogue, a new beginning. In the end, it wasn't about what happened to Ethan. It wasn't about what he had done to me or how much he had suffered. It was about me and the choices I made moving forward. With Lucas by my side, I started a new journey. I decided to pursue a career that truly mattered to me, one that would give me fulfillment and purpose. I invested in relationships that nurtured my soul, surrounded by people who respected me for who I was, not for what I had endured. And, most importantly, I learned to love myself again. To forgive myself for the mistakes, for the years lost in vengeance, and for believing that my worth was tied to what others had done to me. As for Ethan? His life was his to live, and I had long since stopped caring about the consequences of his actions. He had no place in my future. And for the first time in a long while, I could say that I was truly at peace. The end.